Okay, welcome to our next thought leadership session, where today we're going to be talking about sustainability and how procurement can drive this both from a doing good perspective, but also how to drive the function's relevance in your organization. Now, this is a real particular topic of interest for me, as I firmly believe that procurement done well gets to change the world. It gets to create jobs, it gets to change the environment, it helps lift people out of poverty, as well as ensuring our organization remains competitive and relevant in the market in which it operates. Joining me today to discuss this is my friend and my colleague, Frank Omare, who is a sustainability advocate for procurement and Senior Director, Global Industry and Value Advisory for Spend Management and Sustainability Champion. Frank, welcome.
Thank you very much, Gordon.
Now, even though we're currently about 12,000 miles away from each other, I think we grew up about 50 miles apart from each other in the northwest of England.
Indeed, yes, a great part of the world, and we have some great football teams from there as well.
We do. We won't probably talk any more about that because I think that's where we diverge somewhat in our opinions. Okay, Frank. So let's get into it. What does sustainability mean for you, and why do you think should it matter for procurement?
Okay. Sustainability is a passion of mine, and it has been for many, many years. I studied chemical engineering at university. I've always been passionate about the environment and what we can do to actually safeguard the planet for future generations. And over the years, my passion for environmental sustainability has actually broadened into other areas, like eradicating modern slavery, leveling the playing field for everybody, building ethical supply chains, and having a more inclusive society. So over the years, my passion for sustainability has actually grown exponentially. And I've been very fortunate insofar as I've been able to focus on sustainability in my current role within SAP. So I'm really passionate about sustainability. And you've only got to look across what's happening in the world to actually see there is so much to be done. But the good news is the potential to make the world a better place for everybody in terms of equality, a clean environment, leveling the playing field for everybody, everybody coming together as one. I think the potential is absolutely enormous. And if you take that into the world of business, supporting local businesses, indigenous businesses, women-owned business, minority business, there's something there for everybody. If we actually re-engineer our supply chains and business models, we can actually build a more inclusive society where everybody prospers. In terms of the role of procurement, I've done procurement for over 20 years, so like you, Gordon, very experienced. And we think differently from most procurement people insofar as for you and I, it's not just about cost savings and increasing spend on the management. It's actually using your influence across the supply chain to make commerce more exciting, but also a force for good where we can actually drive positive change and impacts. I think the role of procurement clearly is to work more closely with the board. So not in its own little bubble of, as I said, cost reduction, increasing spend on the management. It's thinking a bit more strategically and broadly across the organization. What can I do? What can my function do to help the organization achieve its strategic objectives? So I think procurement can raise its profile, broaden its role, and support the wider sustainability objectives of an organization. And at a practical level, what does that mean? Well, it's procurement that does the sourcing and does the contract award. When you're doing the contract award, you can actually think about when you award contracts, how can you drive social impact through those contracts? It's about thinking about the payment terms. And yes, I know the name of the game is to extend payment terms and improve your working capital. But wouldn't it be great if you could actually optimize your payment terms? So for some suppliers, yes, it makes sense to push out the payment terms. But for small, medium-sized businesses, vulnerable suppliers, how's about accelerating payment to improve their cash flow, which in turn supports the communities in which you operate? And then there's things about making sure procurement policies are aligned with the wider sustainability objectives of an organization. So as an organization, you're putting together procurement policies which align with what the organization is trying to do with respect to sustainability. Then there's the external piece as well, in terms of having supply codes of conduct. If you want to make the world a better place, and I'm sure we all do, have that reflected in terms of how you want your suppliers to behave. Spend time with them, educate them, train them, make sure that your supply base is compliant with your own policies. And then performance management. Yes, we think about SLAs and quality, but let's also think about sustainability performance of our suppliers. Again, all these things are within the gift of procurement. And that's before we even talk about driving innovation, coming up with environmentally friendly products, supporting social enterprises, integrating them into your supply chain. So, like you, Gordon, I think procurement has a significant role, if not the most significant role, in an organization to drive sustainability.
I know that you talked about obviously the caring of the environment, and I think sustainability historically has its roots in that environmental sector, but it also now has obviously broadened. You know, you talked about your passion broadening. The term sustainability is, I think, has broadened as well in terms of fair work and modern slavery, social, economic kind of indicators for things that we want to do, ecological types of things we want to do. Where do you think sustainability is going to go next?
Yeah, I think sustainability now needs to evolve. So you're right, there are various components. And I think those components need to come together. So I think it's more about integration, Gordon. So for example, there is a direct correlation. There's lots of studies out there that there's a direct link between climate change and the well-being of people. And the well-being of people obviously impacts the social and economical side of things as well. And so it's about having all these things integrated. Diversity in the workplace for us, diversity in the supply chain. So it's about thinking about all these concepts and how you can actually integrate them. And I do like your point about suppliers. They're part of the extended ecosystem. They're not just a third party. So it's having all these things, whether it's climate change, well-being, eradicating modern slavery, decent work, fair work, integration of small, medium-sized businesses, social enterprise, is all of that coming together into one holistic strategy. And I think we're getting there, but the various bits and pieces are still fragmented and still working in isolation. So I think the next stage is integration.
We're thinking about like practicality. Let's try and bring this practical in terms of some things that people can do today, tomorrow, etc., just to start on a sustainability program. What do you think a good sustainability program looks like, you know, from a vision perspective, but also then practically, if we were to start today, what do you think procurement could lead and deliver that would have an impact?
Yeah. So the longest journey has always starts with the first step. So you're quite right. So at a practical level, what you need to start thinking about doing. So at an organization level, certainly at a board level, you need to have some kind of vision or aspirations in terms of what it is you want to do. And it could be very simple, like we want to support local communities, or we want to build a more inclusive ecosystem, or it could be about reducing carbon footprint, being carbon neutral. Many organizations set themselves targets. We want to be carbon neutral by X years' time. Whatever it is you want to drive at a corporate level, procurement needs to align itself with those specific targets, or even just one target. Pick one target if you like. And for example, let's just pick carbon footprint, being neutral. How can procurement influence that? Well, we know, Gordon, that over the last 10, 20 years, so you and I are showing our age now, there's been this quest for the holy grail of low-cost country sourcing from faraway locations, efficiencies, cost reduction, etc., etc. But we know that's come at a price in terms of lack of transparency and visibility across the supply chain, and also risks as well. Because what happens with these complex supply chains is that you have many, many components. And I read something very interesting the other day that suggested that for 1 cup of coffee, it required 29 companies working together across 18 countries. Can you imagine a pandemic where one supplier falls over in one particular country? So the whole thing just collapses like a house of cards. Notwithstanding that, the reason why I'm saying, even if you want to pick carbon footprint reduction, is that we know that sourcing from faraway locations actually increases your carbon footprint. So I'm not suggesting we move everything back onshore. I'm suggesting that we need to optimize the supply chain. So where does it make sense to source from faraway locations or in the regions? But also, where does it make sense to source locally so we've got some agility and flexibility in our supply chain? That in turn, that rebalance, reoptimization, call it what you will, helps to actually optimize and reduce your carbon footprint. It helps you to streamline your supply chain, make it more efficient. So that's something that procurement can do at a practical level. So when we're talking about being carbon neutral in 5 years' time, as a CPO or head of procurement, you can be asking yourself this question: where am I sourcing? Does it make sense to do that? And if I was to look at total cost of ownership, am I really getting the cost efficiencies I think I am? Oh, and by the way, there's an opportunity for me to reduce our carbon footprint, support local businesses, and support the communities in which we operate.
And I think the regionalization from globalization is happening anyway. And I think that nature thing is coming, because one of the things that I heard someone at Ariba Labs, Ian Bremner, I think, talked about, globalization helps find efficient supply chains, but it doesn't find resilient supply chains. It doesn't find agile supply chains. And so that's going to, I think we're going to see, not wholly. I don't think it means that you turn around and, as you say, don't throw everything away overnight. But I do think that there are going to be pockets of things you're going to go around. We're going to turn around and do the opposite of historically what we've been doing, which is let's bundle things together. And because we bundle things together, we reduce the number of suppliers that we can actually choose from, because there's only a few suppliers that can do all these things. I think we're going to see a disaggregation of some of our demand. And that's going to become significantly more localized. And that's got impacts in terms of digitalization. That's got impacts in terms of, technology-enabled suppliers for a startup. But I think what it can do, obviously, is it's going to contribute to in that case, obviously, the sort of carbon footprint. But to summarize your point, I think it's really good is, I think there were two things that I heard there. One is there's got to be a reason why. You've got to have this vision, this why statement, and to steal from Simon Sinek, because, hey, why not, right? It starts with why. And then the second thing is, like, pick one thing. Pick one thing. We want to start somewhere. Pick one thing that should be aligned to your organization's objectives, because they will have some. Pick the one thing that you can actually make a difference with, and then go to it. Which kind of brings me to my next question, really, is how do we measure that? How do we measure what our supplier base does? And I'm kind of coming at this from, I've heard CPOs in the past saying, yeah, it's a great thing, but I'm measured on cost savings. How am I going to start measuring sustainability? What are the measures that I can do to help, grow sustainability, social inclusion, purpose in our supply base?
Yeah. Okay. So before I get onto those KPIs and measures, even if you're dealing with somebody who is still trying to come to terms with the benefits of sustainability, if you want to pick cost reduction as still being a metric, which you and I think is outdated, and there's lots of other things we can be doing which are more innovative, but let's just pick cost reduction, and then we'll go on to some of the more interesting things. Cost reduction. Traditionally, in an organization, when it comes to procurement, and you and I know this, CPOs, head of procurements, will set as part of their policy, will say spend above a certain threshold needs to be managed centrally, professionally by the team of category experts we have. Spend below a certain threshold, we provide guidance to the businesses, but we allow them to do that themselves. Now, when you think about that spend below a certain threshold, that is fragmented. It's not managed professionally. Now, if you were to put your arms around that and just call it tactical spend, and think about, okay, in terms of tactical spend, where does it make sense to actually delve into those areas, do something very quick and dirty in terms of maybe just a couple of bids and whatever it is, working with the businesses? Wouldn't it be great if you could actually put that spend through social enterprises, minority-owned businesses who can provide those goods and services, and it's not at a risk to the organization because you're not dealing with high spend.
Yep.
Now, if you were to kind of professionalize some of that tactical spend, drive social impact by supporting local communities uh, and social enterprises, guess what? You can actually deliver some cost savings because that spend was not under contract and not under management. So the point I'm making is that even if someone to say, hey, look, I'm focused on cost savings, I haven't got time for this. Well, actually, if you were to look at your spend profile and do some spend analysis, spend below a certain threshold is quite significant. And if you were to save 2% of that, you can still achieve your objective of cost saving and driving sustainability.
Mm.
So that's just one example.
Yeah.
So if we go into some more interesting things like how do you measure the impact of a sustainability program where procurement's involved? Well, think about some of the things we've just been talking about. Supporting local communities, small businesses, disadvantaged people who want to come into the workforce. It's about creating opportunities for these people through some of your sourcing activities. Again, tactical spend being used as a force for good. Mm. You can measure that in terms of social impact, number of jobs created, for example, in the local community. I mean, if creating jobs doesn't appeal to anybody, then I don't know what does.
Well, and I remember reading a report, and I think it was talked about at Ariba Live in Sydney last year. For every $100,000 spent with a social enterprise, you create 1.5 jobs.
There you go. There you go. Exactly.
Yeah.
And then there's diversity inclusion. Do some spend profiling. Baseline it. At the moment, how many diverse minority-owned businesses does our supply chain support? Okay, whatever that number might be. It could even be 0. But as a result of your sustainable procurement in X years' time, 1, 2, 3 years, you can measure that. How was the growth of minority-owned businesses, social enterprises in our supply chain manifested itself? And you can measure that spend by supplier. You and I could very quickly measure that. Mm. So that's another thing. So we've got the social impact, number of jobs created, number of minority-owned or diverse businesses that you are supporting. Spend by those categories as well, if you wish. And then there's investment in community projects. So there's quite a few organizations that reinvest some of their profits in sustainability programs, whether it's somewhere in Africa, whether it's supporting the wild forest, whether it's providing clean water in some parts of the world, whether it's saving the Amazon forest or closer to home, the recruitment of autistic people into the workforce, the return of women into the workforce. There are lots of things you can measure, and you can not only measure those things directly, but through the organizations in your supply chain ecosystem. They can actually produce reports which actually say, thank you very much. As a result of doing business with us, this is a social impact we've been able to drive in our part of the world or another part of the world, depending on what their mission is.
Yeah.
And then, as you and I were talking about before, into the carbon footprint reduction, again, that's something you can measure. Baseline it. What is our carbon footprint at the moment with our supply chain ecosystem? As a result of implementing sustainable procurement, what is our carbon footprint now? And how have we contributed to the organization's objectives? Mm. So there's quite a few measures there, Gordon, where you can see.
And as you speak, it dawned on me that one of the things that we're talking about here is obviously our impact on society. And if we're in a market that, as an organization, that relies on either the consumers or they're doing business with, business to business or business to consumer, then those customers are looking for our organization to actually do these types of things. Procurement historically hasn't had the greatest relationship with marketing. I think you'll probably agree with that. This is actually a door to open, to go to marketing and say, if we do these kind of things, what sort of brand value is this going to give to us? That's going to open a conversation. That's going to open a conversation with historically a stakeholder that has traditionally tried to keep procurement away. And all of a sudden, procurement's doing something for the organization. In fact, doing something for marketing. And that's a wonderful way to potentially open the door to historically a difficult stakeholder. Cool, mate. That has been awesome. I really appreciate you spending the time with us today. This morning your time, this evening my time.
It's been my pleasure.
It's been good to spend the time, and I will see you soon.
Indeed. All right. Thanks a lot.
Thanks, mate.